Created by ContentBinger.com. Criminal Law Glossary. Letters O and P.
Letter O. On point means the law cited is discussing the precise issue now at hand. As in, this opinion is not on point as authority in our case. On recognizance motions are requests by a criminal defendant to be released without bail on his promise to appear in court on a specific date. Overruled means a judge's ruling that an attorney's objection will not be granted. On recognizance is the release, without bail, of a criminal defendant who promises a judge to appear at future court proceedings. This is possible in all cases in which a defendant is entitled to post bail. The judge in such cases also has statutory discretion to release a defendant on his own recognizance or responsibility without posting bail for subsequent court appearances. Failure by a defendant to later appear in such a case is, itself, a crime. P. Parental responsibility laws are statutes in which parents are held responsible for the acts committed by their children. Parental rights are rights to exercise parental control and custody over a child. Parole is a release from prison before the full sentence has been served, granted at the discretion of a parole board. Parolee is a convict who has been released from prison before the full sentence has been served. He will be subject to the direction of a parole board. Partial emancipation is the legal doctrine that allows minors to keep and spend their own earnings. Parties are the people concerned with or taking part in a pending legal action or lawsuit. Paternity is the state or condition of a father, the relationship of a father or fatherhood. Paternity action is a legal action to determine parentage and often the legal obligation of support. Penal code is a list of criminal offenses and recommended sentences. Perjury is the crime of intentionally lying after being duly sworn to tell the truth by a notary public, court clerk or other official. Petition is a formal written request for something to be done. Plaintiff is the party who files a complaint, in the case of criminal law, the government. Plea is the defendant's formal reply to the criminal charges, guilty, not guilty, or nolo contendere. To be considered valid, a guilty plea must be voluntary, intelligent, and informed, and the court determines this by questioning the defendants and pointing out the possible sentences. Defendants who refuse to plead to the charges, who must stand mute, have a not guilty plea entered for them by the court. Plea bargain, also, plea agreement, is a plea that usually involves a criminal defendant pleading guilty or nolo contendere to agreed upon charges in return for an agreed upon disposition. Points and authorities are legal authorities, usually cases and statutes, cited by a party to support his position in a court action. Poisonous tree doctrine is the legal theory whereby an illegality by an officer may jeopardize the admission into court of evidence items or observations by police. Predicate fact is a fact from which a presumption or inference arises. Preliminary hearing is a hearing before a court, often held in felony cases, to protect the defendant against unwarranted prosecution and detention by requiring the state to establish probable cause that the defendant committed a crime. Preponderance of the evidence is the standard of proof generally used in civil suits. To prevail, the party must present sufficient evidence in court to show that his or her claims are more likely to be true than not. Pretrial conference is a meeting in court between the judge, the district attorney, and defense attorney to attempt to settle a criminal charge. Pretrial hearings are a hearing before a trial to facilitate settlement of a case, also called a pretrial settlement conference. Pretrial writ is an appeal to a higher court prior to trial. Preventative detention holding a person against his or her will because of the likelihood that the individual will commit a crime. Prima facie means sufficient to establish a fact or raise a presumption unless disproved or rebutted. Principal is the person who actually commits a crime, or sometimes principal can mean the amount of money borrowed or loaned which does not include interest. Prison is a place of confinement for criminals who were convicted of felonies and are serving long-term sentences. There are two types of prison: state prison, where sex offenders, those who have committed serious or violent crimes and some three-strikers, are held, and county jail prison. Probable cause means reasonable grounds to believe that a felony was committed, and that the person arrested is the felon. Also, the legal basis on which warrants are issued by the court and defendants are bound over from the preliminary hearing or the grand jury. Probation, formal, is a period of time when a person is under the supervision of a probation officer to make sure court orders against the minor are followed. Probation officer, PO, are county employees of the probation department who work with defendants convicted of crimes. Duties vary, but generally supervision of defendants on probation. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is the standard of proof required to obtain a conviction at a criminal trial before a jury or judge sitting alone. The state's burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt in court applies to each separate criminal offense with which the defendant is charged. Property return happens in some criminal cases. Personal property is held by law enforcement or by the court as evidence. Prosecution is the process of suing someone in a civil case or bringing someone to trial on criminal charges. Prosecutor is the government's attorney in a criminal case. Prostitution means performing sexual acts for money. Prove meant to show with evidence that something exists, is true, or is untrue. Proximate cause is a cause that is legally sufficient to result in liability. Public defender is an attorney who is paid by the county to defend those without money who are accused of committing crimes.
Thanks for watching. For more content, check out contentbinger.com.